11% of the world's uranium reserves lie in Namibia, a unique country on the arid African continent. This nation also possesses some of the largest offshore diamond mines on Earth, creating two almost unbelievable extremes. Such mineral wealth usually guarantees prosperity for the economy, but this is just the beginning. Why does this land still face a desperate struggle for survival? The mines operate without pause, yet only 2% of the entire territory is suitable for agricultural cultivation. One can notice how the Namib Desert gradually advances, consuming the already depleted land. At first glance, it seems the nation has run out of options against one of the driest regions on the planet. But in reality, an unexpected solution has emerged from the cold depths of the ocean. Green masses of seaweed float in the coastal currents. It gets more complex further on. Seaweed acts as the potential savior for the scorched earth. It is visible how this seemingly fragile marine plant challenges the extreme dryness. The potential of this organic matter opens a new path for the country. 2,000 kilometers of arid earth stretch along the Atlantic coast of southwestern Africa. Why do experts classify this region as harsher than the scorching Sahara or the icy Gobi? At first glance, the sand looks familiar, but in reality, the dryness here is absolute. The Namib receives almost no rain year-round, recording annual precipitation of just 2 to 10 millimeters. But this is just the beginning. This figure is dramatically lower than even the driest areas of the Gobi. One can notice towering sand dunes rising nearly 300 meters into the sky. This landscape has shaped the entire climate of Namibia. The environment pushes physical endurance to the limit. Because of the extreme exposure, daytime temperatures exceed 45 degrees Celsius. The heat bakes the surface until the sun dips below the horizon. Then, the air temperature plunges below 10 degrees Celsius. It gets more complex further on. The Namib remains the desert of deserts. Only 2% of the national territory possesses sufficient water reserves for full-scale cultivation. This figure looks critically small against a country spanning nearly 824,000 square kilometers. Deserts do not cover the entire area, but the remaining land is hardly more livable. Harsh climatic factors dictate strict limits on production. But this is just the beginning. Why do the local rivers provide almost no support to the farmers? One can notice how the channels stand empty for the vast majority of the year. Water streams appear strictly after heavy rainfall, which happens here exceedingly rarely. Consequently, for many months, these are nothing more than dry, scorched beds, unable to irrigate the fields. At first glance, the agricultural sector functions, but in reality, it operates on a sparse scale with total dependence on natural vagaries. It is currently capable of supporting only about 25 to 40% of the inhabitants. Meanwhile, the population increases at an average rate of 2% annually. Food demand grows, while the volume of arable soil remains almost unchanged. It gets more complex further on. Without finding ways to transform barren territories into fertile soil, the industry faces the risk of inevitable collapse. One of the most nutrient-rich marine ecosystems on the planet borders a mainland so arid that cultivation is nearly impossible. The cold Benguela Current carries vast amounts of minerals and nutrients up from the ocean floor in a continuous, powerful stream. This flow nourishes an entire kingdom of seaweed stretching along the southern African coast. At first glance, this aquatic environment seems unrelated to agriculture, but in reality, it opens an unexpected lifeline for the parched land inland. Why is this specific marine flora so critical for the dry soil? The answer lies in the unique biology of the plant. Seaweed grows extremely fast, absorbing minerals directly from the water and accumulating a remarkable store of natural nutrients within its cells. One can notice how the biomass holds everything from potassium and calcium to rare trace elements that Namibia's soils are severely lacking. It gets more complex further on. Once harvested, the material is composted and processed properly to become a nutrient-rich organic fertilizer. This substance is capable of restoring degraded soils and improving water retention significantly. Microbial life reactivates, restoring the biological balance of the ground. Thus, an unforeseen solution emerges from the ocean depths. The land revives through the application of processed seawater components. 30 hectares of underwater forest now sway in the currents, defying early skepticism about ocean agriculture. When the idea of bringing life from the sea onto land was first proposed, many people in Namibia were doubtful of its success. But just a few years later, what was once dismissed as vague and unrealistic has become a fully operational model with real infrastructure and personnel. One can notice how the kelp forests off the coast of Lüderitz grow larger every day. This initiative marks the beginning of the country's large-scale underwater farming. But this is just the beginning. Kelp Blue deployed its first cultivation rafts to anchor the expanding ecosystem. Why are the gardens secured by submerged mooring lines? It might seem easier to let the seaweed float freely on the surface, but this stable structure allows the plants to grow vertically throughout the water column, fully absorbing the abundant nutrients carried by the cold Benguela Current. On a weekly basis, teams of marine engineers and divers descend into the depths to inspect growth rates. It is visible how they carefully trim only the mature sections before bringing them aboard the harvesting vessels. The raw kelp is transported directly to shore on the same day to prevent natural decomposition caused by prolonged exposure to air. It gets more complex further on. This is considered the first industrial-scale kelp farming model on the entire African continent. At first glance, the processing facility in Lüderitz looks like a standard mill, but in reality, it operates a complex biological fermentation system. All raw material is thoroughly washed and finely ground before being fed into the tanks. From there, the mixture is separated into specialized product streams, including biological extract solutions and biostimulants for agriculture. Microorganic formulations are created to improve soil structure, alongside carbon-rich byproducts for industrial use and carbon dioxide storage. Crucially, this process does not degrade marine ecosystems, as the model harvests only mature portions like pruning trees in a forest. Farming activities are intentionally conducted outside sensitive habitats to avoid any negative impacts on native marine wildlife. As of the year 2024, the company aims to expand to 6,400 hectares, laying the foundation for Namibia's ocean agriculture industry. 25 to over 60% is the explosive increase in crop yields recorded on experimental farms in Namibia. Why did lands once cracked and barren from drought suddenly begin to change color? At first glance, the pale, compacted soil seemed beyond repair after years of relentless arid exposure. But the application of fermented and processed seaweed caused the earth to become looser and retain moisture for significantly longer periods. Namibian farmers could hardly believe their eyes as the first batches returned to the fields. One can notice how varieties once considered nearly impossible to grow, such as maize, millet, and leafy vegetables, began to firmly take root. After just 2 to 3 growing seasons, the crop started to thrive and produce stable yields. But this is just the beginning of the biological transformation. Crop failure rates dropped sharply even in years of extremely low rainfall. Because in a country where many regions receive only 2 to 10 millimeters of rain annually, such resilience is a rare outcome. It seems like a simple agricultural adjustment, but in reality, the soil ecosystem itself came back to life. Microbial activity surged, and earthworms reappeared in the dirt, churning the organic matter. Clear signs emerged that the ground had genuinely regenerated from the inside out. And this is not the limit of the impact. On a broader scale, farming models using seaweed-based fertilizers are helping Namibia reduce its dependence on costly imported chemical fertilizers. Some projects have recorded input cost reductions of 30 to 50%, opening a vision of a sustainable future right in a land once considered uninhabitable. From the cold Benguela Ocean to the cracked fields inland, seaweed has become an unexpected green miracle. The nation now moves away from the edge of widespread desertification. 50 to 60 meters is the vertical reach of the organism, known scientifically as Macrocystis pyrifera. This species, commonly called giant kelp, forms vast underwater forests along the coast. It stands out as one of the fastest growing organisms on the planet. Namibia specifically selected this giant kelp from dozens of potential seaweed species. Why is this specific kelp the chosen key to soil restoration? It might seem that any biomass could serve as compost for the land, but the true reason lies in an exceptionally rich nutritional structure. At first glance, it looks like simple organic matter, but in reality it contains more than 60 trace minerals and amino acids. One can notice how the fronds thrive in the nutrient-rich cold Benguela Current. This allows the kelp to grow up to 30 centimeters per day. It creates a renewable resource for harvest. But this is just the beginning. The biological power of the ocean transfers directly to the land. Bioactive compounds stimulate growth, while easily decomposable organic carbon feeds the earth. Processed into compost, the material improves soil structure and enhances water retention. It boosts microbial activity and reduces the need for chemical fertilizers. This is critical for a country where only about 2% of the land is suitable for cultivation. This agricultural model brings dead soil back to life through the natural power of the ocean. 60 centimeters of vertical growth every single day is the rate kelp achieves in the cold, nutrient-rich waters of the Benguela Current. These locations are far more than simple production sites for fertilizer. When scaled up to an industrial level, they transform into true underwater forests, functioning as ecological conductors. One can notice how the towering trunks rise from the seafloor to the surface, stretching tens of meters high. But this is just the beginning. Why do these submerged structures function like ecological conductors of the ocean? The visual resemblance to terrestrial woodlands is striking to any observer. In reality, the dense vegetation traps nutrients that would otherwise be swept away into the deep ocean by strong currents. Simultaneously, the fronds provide critical shelter for fish, shellfish, and countless microorganisms. A rich ecological corridor takes shape just beneath the waves, opening new possibilities for marine tourism in Namibia. Diving through these kelp forests creates a unique experience unlike anything else in Africa. Much like forests on land, these ecosystems absorb carbon dioxide on a massive scale. At first glance, the environmental benefit seems absolute, but in reality, scientific debate surrounds this specific capability. Controversy has begun to surface in the United States and Europe regarding the efficiency of this process. Many environmental organizations are questioning whether kelp forests can genuinely store carbon at a meaningful scale. Some experts argue that this narrative may be a form of greenwashing used by major companies to market carbon credits. Not all of the carbon absorbed by seaweed is permanently retained in the ecosystem. Much of it releases back into the environment as the kelp naturally decomposes, while only a small fraction actually sinks to the seafloor to be buried long-term. Amid this international skepticism, Namibia sees one certainty regardless of the climate debate. These underwater forests are already delivering nutrients to the ocean and jobs to local communities. The harvest provides raw materials to revive fields long left barren. With every new hectare of kelp growing offshore near Luderitz, the exhausted land finds a new source of regeneration. 100 tons of harvest, exactly the volume reached by Kenyan coastal villages like Makwiro and Kibuyuni in just 1 year. This shift began on the eastern side of the continent in the early 2000s. Why did communities turn to the ocean when agriculture failed? For years, prolonged drought had systematically crippled traditional farming on land. The answer lies in the marine plant itself, which requires neither soil nor fresh water to grow. Farmers set up hanging lines in the shallows where the tide constantly refreshes the crop. But this is just the beginning. By the year 2022, this cultivation generated more than 30,000 United States dollars in revenue, an amount previously unimaginable. One can notice how the harvested material is dried and processed into fine food powders, soap, and shampoo. These finished products are then exported to major markets in China, France, and the United States. At first glance, this success seems like a minor economic shift, but in Tanzania, the scale proves to be much more striking. The nation is now the third largest seaweed producer in Africa, employing 25,000 farmers, most of whom are women. It is visible how this sector has become a critical lifeline as job opportunities shrink and terrestrial farmland degrades. Consequently, seaweed accounts for nearly 90% of Tanzania's total fisheries export value. Once impoverished fishing villages have transformed into bustling processing hubs. The process is only gaining momentum. Thousands of jobs have emerged in cosmetics and bio-based product manufacturing to support the supply chain. The camera glides over the coastal waters, where the plants absorb energy directly from the sun. This offers a path to resilience for communities previously threatened by climate change. The cultivation cycle continues, providing stability to the region's economy without haste. 2025 serves as the definitive deadline for the prohibition of single-use plastic bottles in Namibia. This strict regulatory measure reinforces the ban on plastic straws, which has been active since 2024. Despite these laws, large amounts of plastic waste continue to wash ashore annually across many African countries. The ocean ceaselessly returns accumulated debris to the coast. But this is just the beginning. Why does the search for a sustainable solution lead specifically to seaweed? One can notice how this marine flora already helps revive degraded land in the region. But for the packaging industry, the key lies in sodium alginate extracted directly from the biomass. This substance becomes the foundation for a new generation of protective materials. At first glance, plant extracts seem fragile, but in reality, the resulting bio-based coating offers heat tolerance comparable to petroleum-based plastics. Scientists from Flinders University in Australia and the German technology company CH Bioforce have successfully developed this formula. The material is fully biodegradable in nature while maintaining high oil resistance and water resistance. Transition to the next level. Therefore, the invention aims to effectively replace plastic coatings in food packaging. The technology moves towards a safe application cycle. 2% is the specific limit of land suitable for farming in Namibia. Fields remain cracked by drought under the relentless sun, rendering traditional agriculture nearly impossible. But this is just the beginning of the transformation. Why does the search for resources turn to the ocean? The dry earth fails to provide a reliable harvest. The solution emerges from the cold Benguela Current instead. Towering columns of seaweed sway in the nutrient-rich flow. One can notice how the marine flora thrives where terrestrial plants wither. At first glance, the situation looks dire, but in reality, the water holds the agricultural potential from unexpected places. The country secures its future not on land, but in the depths. The method of production moves to a new environment,